What would happen if you discovered that a company valued at $9 billion was selling a product that simply didn't work? That's what Theranos promised. A biotech startup reached a valuation of $9 billion without ever having independently demonstrated that its technology worked. Investors who handed over more than $400 million, patients who received tests based on a machine that didn't work as advertised, and a founder, Elizabeth Holmes, who for years cultivated the image of a visionary genius with her black turtleneck and her deep voice. While her stake in the company was valued at more than $4.5 billion, the secret that brought it all crashing down, most of the tests the company sold as its own, were being run on machines bought from another manufacturer, hidden in the basement of the lab. To understand the fraud, you first have to see what was promised to the world. Until October 2015, Theranos claimed it could run more than 240 lab tests from just a few drops of blood, obtained with a simple finger prick, no needles in the arm, no tubes, no white coats. The promise was as beautiful as it was ambitious, a revolution that would make medical diagnosis cheaper and more accessible, exactly the kind of story Silicon Valley loves. Elizabeth Holmes, the founder, became the public face of that revolution. Holmes had built her public image with obsessive attention to detail. The black turtleneck, the deep voice, the unblinking gaze. She was the embodiment of the genius Silicon Valley wanted to believe in. But behind that stage were ordinary machines bought from conventional manufacturers. But behind that number, 240, another number was hiding, 15. The star device, named Edison, was a compact machine that promised to analyze dozens of parameters with traditional lab-level accuracy. In her presentations, Holmes spoke of it as the heart of the revolution. But by late 2014, the Edison was being used for only 15 of the more than 240 tests Theranos offered the public. 15 out of 240, less than 7%. The vast majority of the tests, the ones patients took home believing they came from patented technology, were being run in secret on commercial equipment. Siemens machines, someone else's technology, bought and hidden so that no one would see that the emperor had no clothes. The promise was beautiful, a painless prick, a few drops of blood, and a range of diagnoses that would change medicine. The reality, according to data some employees were seeing, was very different. Diluted blood, distorted parameters, erratic results. A wrong diagnosis isn't a marketing failure, it's a health risk. And there were people inside the company who couldn't live with that risk. Several employees harbored serious doubts about the Edison's accuracy. One of them filed a formal complaint with federal regulators, accusing Theranos of failing to report results that called the system's reliability into question. The complaint pointed out that this omission could violate federal rules for clinical labs, the same rules that protect any citizen from an incorrect test leading to the wrong treatment. However, the complaint didn't stop the machine. The company kept operating, raising capital, and expanding its network of centers. What happened to that complaint? Why didn't it stop them? Because Theranos was a sealed ecosystem. Investor visits were limited to choreographed demonstrations. The Siemens machines were hidden in windowless rooms that only a handful of employees could access. Non-disclosure agreements were a legal shield, and the fear of retaliation, firings, lawsuits, professional ostracism, sealed the lips of those who knew the truth. The culture of secrecy wasn't an accident. It was the main product. Theranos operated like a black box. No one outside the company could verify whether the Edison actually worked. Regulators, trusting the reputation of the board members and the company's own reports, never carried out a thorough inspection. And the fear of retaliation kept silent the technicians who knew the truth. The trust of $9 billion rested on a story polished down to the last detail, not on a real machine. This is how a confidence bubble is built, not with evidence, but with gestures. A black turtleneck, a deep voice, a cover and fortune. Investors didn't buy a machine. They bought a story. And a story, no matter how well told, cannot analyze a single drop of blood. But technical secrets have an enemy that doesn't understand confidentiality clauses: physics. You can hide a balance sheet. You can dress up a presentation. You can seduce journalists with a story of overcoming. But you cannot fake analytical precision indefinitely. Physics is the ultimate auditor. Data accumulates. Divergent results multiply. And sooner or later, someone shows up with the key to the basement. In October 2015, the Wall Street Journal published an investigation that opened that door. The article, based on internal sources and documents, detailed that Edison was only used for 15 tests, that most were carried out with Siemens machines, and that employees had warned of precision failures that put patients at risk. It was a clean blow. The $9 billion valuation began to fall, not all at once, but like a slow leak that turns a building into ruins. Business partners distanced themselves. Investment rounds dried up. The narrative of years disintegrated in days. The black box had been opened, and there was nothing inside. What followed was no longer a market problem. The United States Department of Justice, through the Northern District of California Prosecutor's Office, initiated the criminal case U.S. versus Elizabeth Holmes et al. It wasn't a civil lawsuit or an administrative fine. It was a federal criminal case. A federal criminal case isn't started over an accounting discrepancy. It started when there are indications that what was told to investors, regulators, and consumers was deliberately false. The distance between a $9 billion valuation and a defendant's bench was the exact measure of the fraud. Theranos didn't fall because innovation was dangerous. It fell because innovation never arrived. And the difference between the two is the difference between creating wealth and destroying it. Between the 240 that was sold and the 15 that existed, one of the most costly trust gaps in modern capitalism was built. Capitalism works when information is verifiable, when investors can audit, regulators can inspect, and employees can speak up without fear. Theranos is what happens when those three mechanisms fail at once. Capitalism didn't fail with Theranos. Those who betrayed its rules failed. Trust isn't a slogan. It's the invisible infrastructure of the markets. Capitalism isn't a game of faith. It's a system that demands evidence. When evidence is replaced by narrative, the result isn't innovation, it's fraud. Rules aren't an obstacle to innovation. They are its safeguard. Without them, the market becomes a casino. What remains isn't just the ruin of a company. It's a warning. Trust is the most fragile asset. And when it breaks, no valuation can hold it up. Trust takes decades to build and minutes to evaporate. A lesson of $9 billion, thousands of misinformed patients, and a future that never existed beyond the script of its founder. The next time someone promises to reinvent something as basic as a blood test, remember that name. Remember Theranos. And remember that physics doesn't negotiate.